Crimea is under fire, a chemical plant is burning.
Russian channels are in a panic. Air defense can't cope. Unite.
Russian Saratov, there's commotion at the oil refinery, everything is on fire. The occupiers are trying to advance into the northern part of Pokrovsk, but the Ukrainian armed forces are fighting back. And furthermore, Ukrainian defense forces have regained control in the area of Huliaipole in the Zaporizhzhia region. Explosions are being heard in Chechnya. Drones struck the Kadyrovites base in Grozny.
Attack drones hit the Kadyrovites bases directly. They struck the Akhmat Sever unit of the Russian National Guard.
Putin is issuing ultimatums and has no intention of negotiating.
If Ukrainian troops withdraw from the territories they hold, then Russia will cease hostilities. If they don't withdraw, the army will achieve its objectives by military means.
Their own against their own, the occupiers shot each other.
9 servicemen were killed. According to eyewitnesses, the fire was directed toward the unit's command.
So friends, at the current pace of advance, Russia will reach the borders of Donetsk region in August 2027. Just imagine this is being reported by the Institute for the Study of War. More details about what's happening on the front line, about the dangers and successes of Ukraine's defense forces, are coming up right now in the report, and afterwards we'll discuss all the details in the studio.
Unknown drones once again attacked the Novokuybishevsk oil refinery in Russia's Samara region, according to Russian media. According to local residents, about 10 explosions were heard. Eyewitnesses also reported bright flashes in the sky. Putin is stockpiling missiles to shell Europe. This warning was delivered by U.S. Army Minister Dan Driscoll during a meeting with European diplomats in Kyiv. This was reported by the New York Times.
So, is Putin shelling Europe or not? That's a very complicated question. If, just yesterday, Russian drones unfortunately landed in Romanian territory, the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Romania would undoubtedly scratch their heads and simply say it was an unfortunate accident. However, if a dangerous Kh-55 missile, which is a very specific type of cruise missile, enters Polish airspace, the Kh-55 is like a very serious and concerning weapon. The 195 series, similar missiles to the Kh-555 and Kh-101, which are used to shell Ukraine by the Russians. Only the Kh-55 is a missile with a nuclear warhead. Well, it actually flew into Poland with a dummy, yes, a mock warhead indeed, instead of a genuine nuclear one. There was absolutely no nuclear charge present there, thank God, but no one can definitively determine during its flight whether there was a real nuclear warhead or not.
According to journalists, regarding the growing missile threat from Russia, Driscoll mentioned this in the context of discussing the American peace plan. European diplomats understood this as a hint from Washington that it is necessary to achieve an end to the war in Ukraine as soon as possible. In turn, Europe is considering retaliatory actions against Russia regarding drone incursions and sabotage, reports Politico citing sources.
Europeans are responding, but they are responding very slowly. And Europeans are taking a reactive stance, a position of reaction to those provocations, to those jabs with which Russia is attacking them, But
Trump himself, it seems, does not have a clear vision of the world that he is trying to steer Ukraine toward. That's why he is asking our country to sign a peace agreement without providing any security guarantees.
Well, obviously that means a change in rhetoric. In actual fact, both within the United States of America. And I would certainly suggest that this sentiment extends to Europe as well. But more recently, the current United States administration has been consistently making it abundantly clear to its various NATO partners, at least through their verbal communications, that while these nations are indeed integral members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO itself is positioned here. And the United States of America is distinctly positioned over here. It's not the same thing. Well, the Americans are forcing Europe into certain actions.
Russia, it seems, is preparing for nuclear war. Russian scientists have developed a unified state standard for detecting areas affected by radioactive, chemical, or biological contamination. The new GOST will come into effect on February 1st, 2026. But as for his own soldiers, it seems Putin doesn't spare them at all. And just in the Zaporizhzhia direction alone, he is losing 100 to 200 men a day, having changed the tactics of the occupying army's advance. Now, instead of the usual infiltration tactic of sending 2 or 3 soldiers to a single position, they send in 10 infantrymen at once, and that's basically where their existence ends. Russia has decided to change its drone tactics and has started using reusable UAVs. One of these new models is the hexacopter Night Witch. It has a payload capacity of about 20 kilograms and a flight time of 40 minutes. Another new development is the Bulldog 13 quadcopter, which has a 4-kilogram payload, modular strike packages, and electronics that allow it to counter Ukrainian radio jamming systems.
A reusable UAV. Previously, various types were used. The same FPV drones with payload drops. This is reusable popularity. Mavic for reconnaissance observation. It's reusable. So, well, to say that some kind of game changer has appeared, I wouldn't say that.
At the same time, Ukraine signed an agreement with the United Kingdom that will allow us to produce Ukrainian interceptors there, which have proven their effectiveness in combating Shaheds. It has been announced that mass production is planned, which could reach several thousand units per month.
Well, it's time to discuss the details of the situation at the front. Roman Svetan, a military expert, is joining us for this discussion. Roman Grigorievich, we're glad to see you. Hello.
Greetings. I wish everyone good health.
Roman Grigorievich, let's start with this topic. So, the Center for Countering Disinformation under the National Security and Defense Council reports that the information about Russian troops allegedly entering Huliaipole in the Zaporizhzhia region does not correspond to reality. The Russians who tried to enter the city were destroyed and cleared out. What information do you have? What can you tell us about this direction?
A few Russian guys slipped into Huliaipole, but they were taken out. Let's put it this way. I'll keep it brief so as not to drag it out. Some agencies and some deputies picked up on this, and they're creating more panic than anything constructive, to say the least. We dealt with them. There's nothing scary about it. The question is, Russians have entered Pokrovsk. Yes, they really have entered, because part of Pokrovsk, south of the railway, is controlled by Russian forces. They have entered. They are in control there. We control the northern part of Pokrovsk. And in Huliaipole, we have full control there. The settlement serves as a certain line of defense, and yes, the Russians have not entered it. They have only approached its outskirts. We do not have sufficient density of forces in this direction, but it is being reinforced. Even if in emergency mode, additional mechanized units have been brought in using armored vehicles, and they have accomplished the task of holding the lines. Basically, Huliaipole is being held for now. At the moment, the garrison defense system there is stable. The only problem, I'll repeat once more, is the insufficiently dense coverage on the northern flanks of Huliaipole itself. In other words, the Russians will keep advancing. Yes, we held the area around Huliaipole, but if they don't go around to the north, they'll head toward Pokrovsk, which means they'll be moving out onto the highway to Zaporizhzhia. That's the main problem. And there, we really won't have enough density. So under no circumstances should we just sit back and say the problem is solved. It's not solved. It will continue to develop, and we'll only solve it when we bring in law enforcement, when we reinforce the troops with a sufficient number of motivated, combat-ready people.
All right, Roman Hryhorovich, let's discuss something else now. Last night, Ukraine's defense forces struck several important enemy targets. The Saratov oil refinery is on fire. I think it's always important to emphasize this because the campaign to destroy Russia's oil industry hasn't gone anywhere, despite the Americans' attempts to send Vitkov to Moscow again. But we'll discuss that later. In addition, there were explosions at the airfield in Novofedorivka. We're talking about strikes on locations where drones were being stored. There are also results from strikes in occupied Donbass. Fuel and lubricants depots were destroyed there. So that's the information from the armed forces of Ukraine. In addition, air defense systems were also damaged. Pantsir S-1, Torem 2. Please comment on our successes in the air. Is there room for further improvement? Then what do you think specifically about these targets that were struck?
This is systematic work. That can already be said with certainty. 4 months of systematic work to destroy the Russian economy by striking the Russian oil industry, oil and gas sector, and petrochemicals. Metallurgy in some areas, military facilities are being hit, energy facilities as well, including both power generation and power transmission. That is, Russian power stations that generate electricity. So there is a systematic strike being carried out against the Russian economy. This is our main strategic objective. to ultimately bring down the Russian economy by undermining it. That is, to bring the state of governance by Moscow over the occupied territories of the entire Russian Federation, since practically all of them are controlled by Moscow, with Moscow as the metropolis and the republics within the Russian Federation as colonies of this metropolis, to such a condition that decisions are made for the self-dissolution of the Russian Federation, just as at one time a decision was made for the self-dissolution of the Soviet Union due to serious economic shocks. It's exactly the same picture with us. And you can see that this is systematic work, like the strikes on the Saratov oil refinery. Why are they important? It's an old plant on the one hand cracking, but it processed more than 1 million tons of oil per year. And for us, it's important, first of all, to cut off this economic mechanism by which the Russian economy gets its money. And secondly, of course, are the refined products from Samara. The products from the oil refinery went to the left bank. It's located on the right bank in Saratov on the Volga, and on the left bank is the Engels 2 airfield. There's a fuel and lubricants depot there, and that's exactly where these products went. These are called light petroleum products, which were delivered there and served a specific purpose in supporting the operation of the airfield. So for us, the military aspect was also important to strike there. That's why a very well thought out, by the way, thoroughly planned and prepared operation was carried out to break through the Russian frontal air defense. Several anti-aircraft missile systems were taken out, by the way. They were neutralized, the defenses were breached, and several dozen drones entered and proceeded to carry out their combat mission over Saratov. But at the same time, a well-executed operation was also carried out against Saky. That's Novofedorivka, the Saky airfield, where it is located, as well as the warehouse and the aviation component of the Russian naval aviation. In addition, there was a strike on the hangars where Russian Orions and four-post drones are stationed. By the way, the four-post is an Israeli drone that is produced at a factory built by Israel in Russia more than 10 years ago. So it was important to take them out. They are quite dangerous drones, especially the Israeli four-post, which costs millions of dollars and moreover can perform. In addition to reconnaissance, it can also carry strike payloads, which end up raining down on us. So as soon as there was an opportunity to take it out, of course, that opportunity was immediately seized. So it was an excellent day for, you could say, the record of our drone forces, air forces, and naval forces that are participating in the strikes on Crimea.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
In the last few hours, another interesting piece of news has come in. At the base of the strategic missile forces in the city of Yasny-Orenburg region already, the latest missiles are stationed there, including the avant-garde missile systems. A powerful explosion occurred, after which a huge cloud of purple smoke rose into the sky. This was reported by local media outlets. The Yasny Cosmodrome is one of 11 sites in Russia from which long-range ground-based missiles can be launched, including missiles with nuclear warheads. So, Roman Grigorievich, what do you think about this news from Orenburg?
Well, most likely they're having problems with the launch of the Sarmat. Why? Because basically they just can't get this missile to work properly. After we stopped servicing our Voyevoda, the R-36M2, they've been trying to create an equivalent, but they're not succeeding. They can't even manage the so-called mortar launch, which is the main method for launching this type of missile. In order not to destroy the silo, several Sarmats have already exploded right in the silo, damaging it. And some Sarmats, even as they were leaving the launch installation, exploded right above the launch table. They couldn't even clear the table, as rocket engineers say. Only one missile most likely managed to leave and complete its mission, but they still haven't been able to find it. Out of 7 launches, 6 failed, and as for the 7th missile, they just can't find it anywhere. In the end, it flew off. Maybe it hit the planet somewhere, of course, but exactly where is a big problem, because things just didn't work out for them with the Sarmat. And since the task is set and a lot of money has been invested, they will keep trying to replace our main missile, the Voyevoda. They have it on combat duty. We simply refuse to service it. It will soon be decommissioned because without maintenance, it's no longer a missile. The technology there is quite complex, especially in terms of the challenging technical maintenance of these missiles. Thank you. Intercontinental missiles of this level, because I think the Russians, this is exactly the missile that was being tested once again, but it didn't work out for them. They saw a mushroom cloud, not a nuclear one, of course. It's not a nuclear cloud, but a result of failed tests.
There's also an interesting story here about new weaponry. Defense Express reports that the company E-SystemSolutions presented a new strike system based on the inexpensive LCCM cruise missile at an exhibition in Dubai. This long-range missile, as they report, is designed to destroy light and armored vehicles, command vehicles, radar reconnaissance vehicles, command posts, and aircraft. At airfields, the range this missile can reach is between 500 and 1,000 kilometers. The warhead, depending on the range, is between 25 and 50 kilograms. Interestingly, by the way, one of the Russian propaganda outlets presents this company and E-SystemSolutions as a recently established firm founded by specialists from Belarus. I take it this could be a threat to us as well? Or who will compete for this missile? What do you think, Roman Grigorievich, and what is your opinion of the specifications I described at the beginning?
The warhead and the range are always taken as the basis. The range is quite significant indeed. That is, this range borders on short range, 500 kilometers, and beyond is where it starts as well. Medium range is, thousands of kilometers. The Russians have a sufficient number of missiles that, in principle, can cover this range. As for the warhead, well, it's about 5 times smaller than the main warheads of Russian missiles. So the main warhead is 500 kilograms, and here it's 50 to 100. This is about the same warhead level as our Bars missile. Right now, our Bars missile has taken to the skies. Yes, it doesn't have a range of thousands of kilometers. It's less, several hundred kilometers, but the warhead is about the same, 50 to 100 kilograms. It performs a specific task of destroying certain rear targets, a structure at short range in terms of the missile, meaning in principle it's a tactical missile, but nevertheless it performed quite well. Because, for example, in terms of the warhead, you have to understand that this is roughly at the level of our own missiles. Any cruise missile is a good target for air defense, especially where it's deployed. Here, it's very important for us to strengthen the frontal air defense so that not a single Russian cruise missile can get through. Ballistic missiles will still get through, but that's a different approach. It starts with mirror strikes on Moscow and ends with expanding the geography of the updated systems that will be deployed. But in reality, to effectively counter aerial targets, we need to strengthen our air defense on the front line. Then not a single aerial target, that is no cruise missile, will get through. This will become a true kill zone for aerodynamic flying objects, which will not allow any missile, drone or rocket to get through. Because here you can basically put all of them in the same category. All the so-called innovations that the Russians will now come up with, most likely with the help of the Belarusians and probably the Chinese. Although, by the way, the Belarusian industry is very heavily involved in the production of drones of various types. By the way, some of the same circuit boards in Yaran are actually Belarusian, but mostly these are Chinese-made narrow-profile units related to control systems. The same goes for servos, but as for the circuit boards, that's mere progress. Just recently, we struck at, in part, Belarusian-made components, not the equipment itself, but the units that are used on the assembly lines for the same Yaran, Shahed, and other types of drones and missiles. The Belarusian industry, in my opinion, is now very heavily involved in the production of Russian military equipment, Russian and I would say Chinese as well. Why have the Chinese gotten so deeply involved in the Belarusian military industry? So, in other words, they're helping the Russians through these third-party channels, as it's called, because behind the Belarusian potatoes, there are Chinese grasshoppers hiding.
I'll just share this news. I think this is super important, even though it's an internal issue. Nevertheless, I think the decree by the president of Ukraine in which Zelensky dismissed Yermak, the head of the president's office, from his position is important. So to wrap up, let me ask, do you think our Western partners will now have fewer questions regarding the amount of weapons they will be supplying to Ukraine? After all, this has been a tense issue hanging in the air for quite a while. Like the sword of Damocles?
The thing is, firing one person and appointing another doesn't actually solve the problem. We have a power imbalance. The problem is that the office, let's put it simply, just a plain old office, that's supposed to just shuffle papers around. The head of this office should just be some girl who knows how to shuffle papers, and that's it. But what we have is that the office has pulled onto itself all the mechanisms of state governance. It shouldn't be a parliamentary presidential republic. Ours is neither a presidential nor a presidential parliamentary system. We have a parliamentary presidential republic. All governance of the entire state should be in the Verkhovna Rada, since it is the only legislative body, while the executive power, which is precisely the implementation of these laws, should belong to the cabinet of ministers, to the prime minister. In other words, the first person in the country should be the prime minister, the cabinet, which should be made up of people who, in the event of an external invasion, have basic military training. So this is our main problem, which remains unresolved. We need to completely remove and dismiss the current cabinet of ministers and bring in OSR, officers of the strategic reserve, into the cabinet of ministers. These are all colonels and generals who have graduated from the General Staff Academy. They fall into the category of OSAC. A strategic reserve officer is someone who attends lectures and takes exams, by the way, specifically on managing the state during wartime. So, replacing Alibaba with some Jafar or yet another Scheherazade absolutely won't solve the problem, because now it will be Scheherazade running the country. This shouldn't happen by definition, and that's the main problem.
We'll keep watching how events unfold. The main thing is that this inspires trust in our Western partners. At least that's my subjective opinion. Thank you, Roman Grigorievich, for joining us on the air. Roman Svetan, military analyst, was on the air for Ukraine Today. All the best.